Hey guys, welcome back to our cruising tips series. Today you're in for a treat with part 2 of leaving the Mediterranean and preparing for the Atlantic crossing. Make sure you give us a big thumbs up, like the channel, subscribe, and make sure you leave a comment throughout this video. So let's get stuck in. Now, as we covered in our last video, it was all about leaving the Med, your first crossing in the open ocean. You know, you've got a good 400-500 miles of open ocean passage down to the Canary Islands, and that was a good testing ground for your boat. So I think the Canary Islands is the perfect place to really fine-tune your boat, fine-tune your system, do any of those much-needed repairs, and really get the boat ready. Now, because we're part of the ARC, we're in Gran Canaria, but many of our friends were in different parts of the Canaries and found it equally as good. There was a really good selection of chandleries for resources, people to repair things, for help, and tradesmen around. There was also a really good commercial district in Gran Canaria, so maybe a few more of the obscure parts, or maybe not marine specific parts, you could definitely find there. You know, good hardware stores. We found things like thermocouplers for the oven and a few other odds and ends, which we just couldn't find in the chandleries. So there's a really good commercial district out there, which is really helpful. There's really great supermarkets for provisioning. They're all really close to the marina and they all delivered to the marinas. So you didn't have to worry about lugging all those huge amounts of trolleys of food and grog and everything else back to the boat. A lot of them delivered straight to the boat. So you could even just fill up your trolleys there and then they'd deliver them later. Or you could order online and have it all delivered to you. There was also quite a few good like butchers and things like that who made sure they vacuum sealed all the meat and froze it before it got to you. So that way you could just throw it straight in the freezer, it was already frozen, good to go. This part of preparing for your Atlantic crossing as well is a really great opportunity to get the crew involved. We asked our crew to arrive about 10 days before we left, and that was really pivotal in getting them to understand the boat, to get their heads around the boat, to understand the systems, to understand what we are prepared for, what we're not prepared for, and to get them really familiar with what we're doing. There's also a really great chance to get the teamwork building, to see how you all operate as a team, and to see, you know, to find out people's strengths and weaknesses before you're out there in the open ocean. Definitely put some time aside while you're preparing for the crossing for things like safety drills. Go out there for a few day sails. Get people familiar with the boat, how you sail it, how you trim the sails, how you pull them up, how you put them down, how you put reefs in. You know, get people comfortable on the helm, how you use the autopilot, all those things. It's a really big ask to just go straight out there into the ocean. All right, we're going into 18 days of crossing now without doing any training or any drills. So I could really recommend booking in a bit of time, even an overnight sail to one of the other islands or something like that could be really helpful for new crew, especially maybe the unexperienced crew who don't know so much about the sailing or your boat. It's a really good opportunity for them to get their heads around it. As I said, we were part of the ARC, and it was a really great experience to be part of that. I thought it was a really good resource for first-time crossers, as we were. You know, we had to book this pretty far in advance when we'd only just started our Mediterranean journey. And at that point, we were pretty green. We didn't have many miles under the belt. So for us, it was a really great helping hand of how we prepare for this crossing and how we get our heads into it. It also gave us a really good framework on, you know, the timings and the weather patterns and all that kind of stuff, plus all the ARC seminars and information they provide you. It was also a really great atmosphere just to have all the other yachties there. It was a really great community. You know, there was a lot of resources that the ARC really provided in terms of tradesmen. You know, we had like Ray Marine specialists and technicians and all that kind of stuff, which were there to help. So that was a major bonus. Would we do the ARC again? I don't think we would do the ARC again for the same reasons that we did it before. I think we would do it again to participate in the race and to be part of the community, as opposed to trying to gather information for the crossing. I think now that we've done a few crossings and we've got a few more miles under the belt, we're more comfortable with the open ocean passages, but we'd definitely do it again to be part of that community and potentially be racing on bigger boats or something like that. If you're not going to do the ARC, I'd really consider teaming up with a few other boats and create a little pack that you can go together. You know, we found this absolutely critical on our Pacific crossing where we buddy boated with a few boats, and it was really helpful and really nice to be able to talk to those boats on a daily basis, get their positions, you know, and know that someone was out there who could help and just to generally chat to. I'd really recommend, you know, teaming up with these people before you set off and just getting an idea of how they want to do it. You know, maybe you check in every morning, every night. You know, in our Pacific, we checked in each morning and each night. And and to make sure that there was someone out there that knew exactly where you were and that could help if you needed. Because out there in the middle of the ocean, I can tell you, it gets pretty lonely pretty quick. So it's good to know there's a helping hand just around the corner. So in terms of the weather and the route, you'll be waiting for the trade winds that start building in about November. You want to wait for these winds to steady, and these are just going to push you nicely straight across the Atlantic. Easy. They'll generally build from November to March, so you're trying to pick a weather window between that period. One recommendation I have for you is really wait for a good weather window to get off the coast of Africa and to get out of the lee of the Canary Islands. You know, for us, we found that a little bit difficult because we were with the Ark. We had a deadline of when we had to go, and we would have ideally left a day before because there was a really great breeze to get us out of the lee of those islands and to get us out to sea quickly. Once we missed that, it was actually quite fickle winds and it was a little bit challenging. So I'd really recommend finding a good weather window that gets you out of the lee of Africa a couple of 100 miles off and gets you into those steady trades. You really don't want to be burning fuel early on in this journey. You want to be trying to conserve that to the end or in a crisis situation. So yeah, just wait for that weather window. You will find yourself actually doing an arc as those trade winds curve around the big pressure system that sits in the Atlantic Ocean. It curves around and actually makes your way straight up into the Canary Islands. A lot depends on where that system is sitting and how far south or how far north that is as to how far of a rum line you can sail to the Canaries. For us, we deviated about 400 miles south of the rum line to get that arc. To also break up the journey, I would recommend stopping at the Verde Islands. We didn't get the opportunity to do it, but we heard really good reports, and I think it'd be a really great part of the world to see. Plus, it really cuts that big Atlantic crossing up into manageable chunks. You know, you'd have a 5-day passage down to there, and then you'd have about another, say, 12 to 14 days across the Atlantic. In terms of the weather predictions, we found PredictWind super useful. We used both the GFS and the EMF models, and on top of that, we also had, as part of the ARC, a weather router that was giving weather reports throughout the whole duration of the crossing. But PredictWind was pretty good, and we were just downloading that on the Iridium Go. If we were doing it by ourselves, we would consider using a professional weather router. And I would really recommend that if you're not sure about the weather or you want a bit of a helping hand, there are plenty of weather routers out there who do a really good service for you. So let's talk about the crossing itself. What can I say? It was one of the best and most challenging experiences I've ever had. We found a watch system that really worked comfortably for our crew. Given that we had 4 crew, we did 3 hours on, 9 hours off. You know, that was a lot of time off to rest and recuperate. It's very rare that you're going to be able to go and sleep 8 hours in a row. It's going to be quite intermittent sleep, so it was really helpful to have 9 hours where you could kind of rest and nap in patches in between meals and other things. Within that watch system, we also incorporated a cooking and cleaning system to make sure that all the jobs were done on the boat and that no one was overloaded with too much work. We also made sure that everyone did a 3-minute rig check every day. Don't know about the 3-minute rig check? Check out our Patreon page for the full vid now. Also, for those keen fishers out there, now's the time to start doing some really good fishing and catch your dinner. We found as soon as we were even just a few miles out of the Canary Islands, we started catching good fish. But here's a few tips. Like with everything, invest in some good gear. Although I got a good rod, I didn't get the best reel. And unfortunately, it let us down in like day 4, where one of the gears unfortunately stripped inside, so the reel was useless. After that, we were literally just using hand lines off the back, but we were still catching fish. So invest in good, reliable gear because it'll just make your life so much better. Make sure you have a plan with the crew. You know, when that fish starts going off and the line starts running, you want to have your jobs down pat. You know, are you going to furl in the sails? Who's going to be on the helm? Who's going to be on the gaff? You know, because things started happening quickly. You're out there in the open ocean. You know, you don't want to be putting lives at risk, so have a plan with your crew. You have to slow the boat down as well. You know, with you traveling 7 or 8 knots downwind and the fish trying to go the other way, your line's going to run out real quick and it's going to be really hard to pull it in. So have a plan of how you're going to slow the boat down. Make sure you also have a gaff. You know, you don't want to be leaning too far over the side of that boat or off the back of the boat or something like that. You want a gaff that you can quite easily reach the fish, grab it, and pull it up on deck. But remember, safety is king. Everyone must be safe at all times and there mustn't be any risk of anyone going overboard. Finally, if you can avoid killing the fish in the cockpit, I'd really recommend it. Before you know it, it is like a chainsaw massacre scene. There is blood and guts everywhere. If you can, try and bleed the fish outside the boat, off the swim platform, something like that, and really have a plan on how you're going to do it, because it did make it unpleasant once there was blood and guts everywhere. You then had to clean it and then smelt for a few days. So yeah, if you can avoid it, try not to be gutting and dealing with the fish in the cockpit. In terms of actually provisioning for the crossing, check out the video I've already put out on the actual statistics of our crossing, you know, how much fuel we used, how much water, gas, all those things. I think that'd be super helpful if you want more specific detail on actually crossing. But let's move on to what happens Caribbean side of the Atlantic. So we hit St. Lucia, and again, that was part of the arc. We probably wish we'd hit Barbados, only because we would have got to see more of the Caribbean and we heard really good reports. Basically, once you hit that Caribbean, it's really easy sailing up north, because you're just going with the trade winds. For us, when we're in St. Lucia, it's going to be a little bit hard to get back down south at that point. So it just makes sense to hit as south as possible and then work your way north through the Caribbean islands. A few tips. Make sure you stock up on beer and wine while you're in Europe. It only gets more expensive as you leave. So any of those really fine wines or rums or beers or whatever you really like, I'd really recommend stocking up on it now. Also, if you have a deep freezer and you really want to eat meat, I'd really recommend stocking up now while you're in Europe. I found meat really expensive and actually quite hard to get once in the Caribbean. So if you have the option for long-term storage for that kind of stuff, it'll definitely pay dividends down the road. Also, make sure you've researched where you're going to land in the Caribbean. Make sure you understand their immigration policies. Make sure you have all the right documentation to make sure it's a really super easy entry into those countries. The last thing you want to do after 18 days at sea is then be turned away and have some kind of problem. You just want to be celebrating with your mates. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed part 2 of leaving the Mediterranean, and I guess a general overview of the Atlantic crossing. As I said, if you really want specific details on provisioning and our Atlantic crossing debrief, check out our video here. Make sure you give us a big thumbs up for the video, guys. Make sure you hit subscribe and consider becoming a patron if you want to support the journey. Also, make sure you give us a comment below if you really enjoyed these, if you didn't, if there's different information that you'd like me to try to get out there for you, or if there's some other hints that you'd like to share with other yachties. Tune in next time. We're going to start talking about the Caribbean, and it's a really exciting episode, so stay tuned, and I'll see you next time. Bye.